Bustler, economist, public policy analyst, and professor of finance at Stockton University. Michael, always great to have you here. So talk to us. How has President Trump's policies impacted the economy?
So he's going to be touting that in his speech. Remember, this is America's 250th birthday, and there's a huge celebration planned for July and sometime around that. He's going to emphasize that he made America strong, prosperous, and respected. So the number one issue that voters are most interested in, as you point out, is the economy. And look at what he's done with the economy. He's brought the inflation rate down. It was 2.9% when he entered office. It's now down to 2.4%. He brought the unemployment rate down to 4.3%. And for the second and third quarter of last year, we had 4% growth. Now, the fourth quarter growth slowed a little less than half of that, mostly because of the government shutdown, which cut out government spending, most government spending during that time period, and a lot of workers weren't paid. Now, they did eventually get paid, but that had an effect on the economy. So he's going to tout that, look, he's brought prices down. He's increased through his tariff and trade agreements. He's opened up foreign markets to U.S. manufacturers, which will increase the economy. And for the whole year that he's been in office, wage increases have been greater than inflation. So that means you get a real increase in wages. You're able to buy more goods and services. And he'll say that the better times ahead, the best is yet to come.
So, Michael, I want to point your attention to a recent Pew Research poll that said around 72% of Americans say the economy is fair or poor. More than half Americans are saying President Trump's policies have made economic conditions worse in the country. You cited some of the positive impacts overall of the economy. What does President Trump need to do to convince the public that the economy is doing well?
He just needs to keep doing what he's doing. So consumer confidence and consumers' perception of the economy is a lagging indicator. In other words, when the economy starts to do poorly, consumers don't really feel it for 6, 8, 10 months, and then they start to see it. As the economy has been turning around, it'll take some time for consumers to feel that. But consumer confidence, the last 2 months has started to inch up, not much last month, but it is starting to inch up. I would just say to President Trump, stay the course, keep doing what you're doing, work on energy prices. Now, we're going to have a little bit of an increase in energy prices when we get the CPI, the Consumer Price Index for February, mostly because of the Venezuela situation, and in Iran, there's uncertainty about whether there'll be oil supplies. That's driven oil prices up and gasoline prices up. But once he gets all that resolved, the U.S. is producing more oil than we ever have. And that increase in supply, along with the other countries, will help to bring prices down. And I forecast by the end of this year, inflation will be under the 2% target that the Federal Reserve has set. And I think economic growth will be well into the 4% range and perhaps even higher. As that filters through the economy, people will start to feel good about the economy again. I think some of those negative numbers Trump is saying will change.
So, Michael, do you think there is any topic or topics that President Trump must avoid, in your view?
So he'd like to talk about immigration, because when he came into office, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of people were coming into the U.S. every month. He closed the border, and nobody has gotten into the border illegally, I think, for the last 8 or 9 months. He also wants to bring the crime rate down, which he has done. And part of the reason that's happened is that he's taken illegal immigrants who have a criminal record, and he's taken them and deported them. The problem is, a lot of people have somewhat of a problem with that, because a lot of these illegal immigrants have been here for a few years. They're members of the community, and they get very offended when ICE comes after them. So he's probably better off to keep any of the ICE arguments to a minimum and just tout that he's secured the border. The other thing is with tariffs. I'm not sure what he's going to say about that. As you know, the court has struck down the policies that he used to place those tariffs in effect. He does have another way of doing it, which he's doing. But there's a lot of information out there. I saw two studies. One said that the American business and consumers have absorbed over 90% of the tariffs as in the form of higher prices. So they've had to pay that. I don't really see how that's happened, or the inflation rate wouldn't have come down. I think what they're saying, if there was no tariffs, would the inflation rate be down to like 1.5%? I don't think so. So I think that's an inconclusive study. They came up with the wrong conclusions, but he's going to have to talk somehow about tariffs, because that is in play.
So, Michael, you bring up the Supreme Court's recent ruling, right, striking down President Trump's emergency tariffs. Do you think that's going to undercut his speech? Because this is one of his core economic items.
I don't think so, because what happened was the Supreme Court said you can't use that IEEPA law to put those tariffs into effect. There are two other laws. One law says the president can put tariffs unilaterally on everybody for up to 150 days. And at the end of 150 days, he has to get congressional approval, which he'll never get. Another law says that if the administration feels that a country has been practicing unfair labor practices, and that's fairly easy to show, then the Department of Commerce will study that. And if they conclude it's unfair labor practices, he has a right to put a tariff on. So what's going to happen? He put these tariffs on, but over the next 150 days, they'll study which countries have caused the most problems, and then he'll be able to put those tariffs on those countries. One other thing, he has signed agreements with a number of countries, the European Union, and a number of countries. I don't know how that's going to affect things. According to the trade, Jameson Greer, he says that none of the countries so far have wanted to renegotiate the contracts. So if those agreements and contracts stay in effect, and Trump is able to use the other laws for tariffs, tariffs will turn out to be a positive for him rather than a negative.
All right, Michael, just one final thing here. What are the stakes in terms of whether President Trump can convince the public? If he cannot, does that mean his party loses during the midterm elections?
It certainly isn't going to help. This is his one chance to really get his message out. I think 30 million Americans are going to watch this. So this is his one chance to get his message out to the public and to convince them. He's been in office for a year. What he's done is mostly positive. And for the things that voters care most about, immigration, the economy, he's working on that. We should stay the course all the way through this year. And in November, if we continue, he'll say, if we continue to keep the Republicans in control of both the House and the Senate, and obviously the presidency, he'll be able to do a lot more. He'll cite, when the Democrats were in office the last 4 years, we really had a stagnant economy, very high inflation, and a border that was essentially a sieve that let tens of millions of people in. So he'll tout how what's he done very well and how they should keep going. And if you switch to a Democrat, you're going to end up with the problems you had back in the last administration, is what he'll say.
And he did also say that for the most favored nation pricing alone, Republicans should win the midterms, but time will tell. Great hearing your analysis today, Michael. Thank you so much.
Always my pleasure.
Today marks exactly 4 years since the start of the Russia-Ukraine war. How civilians and officials from across Europe are commemorating the grim